Okay, so let the requeling begin. Texas Chainsaw 3D was released in 2013, was directed by Luessenhop, and stars Alexandra Daddario and Dan Yeager. So after a young woman inherits an estate, her, along with her friends, travel to Newt, Texas to a house where they encounter a chainsaw-wielding maniac. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to my Texas Chainsaw Massacre film review series. If you have not watched them yet, I've reviewed all of them up to this point. I'll have them down in the link below. I've got one more to go before we're at the new one. And I'm so sorry I will not be able to make the deadline. As you can probably already tell if you're viewing this by now, it's probably past the deadline. I was hoping to get it out beforehand, but yeah, it is what it is. I try, but I'll have it out regardless. Of course, followed by a ranking of all 9 films, so stay tuned for that as well. Now, Texas Chainsaw 3D is a film that whenever it first came out, I watched the hell out of it. I, of course, watched it with my friends at the theater, and then whenever it came out on Blu-ray, I wore that sucker out. I still have it. It's still playable, and I'm surprised because I've watched it to the bone, pretty much. I watched the hell out of it. I thought it was the best one yet. However, after watching all of them, binge watching them like I've done with this film review series, because I've never really actually watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films back to back, which is basically what I did over a course of several days, but I've never really done that. So after doing that, the opinions kind of have changed. And of course, it's almost been 10 years to the date since this film came out. Did this live up to expectations? Was this as good as the original or any of the others? Let's find out. Opinions have changed, and some for the worse, but some for the good. So before I get into all that, let's get into the positives of Texas Chainsaw, or Texas Chainsaw 3D, whatever you want to call it. And I've got to start with Leatherface. Even though I praised the guy that played him in the remakes, he'll always be my top dog. If I ever do a ranking of all the Leatherfaces, yeah, spoiler alert, I thought Dan Yeager did a decent enough job. Since this is technically an actual sequel to the original 1974 film, I thought Dan Yeager played it pretty well, close to what Gunnar Hansen did. Since this is a different universe, has nothing to do with the remakes or even in the ones in between, this strictly follows the storyline after the original. And I thought he did a decent enough job. And I'll elaborate on this character for a second. Let's veer off here for a little bit. The kills were cool. I gotta say, there's plenty of carnage candy. Did it match up to the remakes? No, not really. But it was still decent enough. It was still good, even better than what we've gotten in this franchise other than the remakes. There's plenty of gore. There's plenty of carnage candy. There's plenty of blood. It was pretty brutal. As I said, though not as brutal as the remakes, it was still good within its own. You got some great jump scares too. Even to this day, after a billion views later, I still jump out of my chair. There's one particular scene where this guy goes down into the basement, kind of like where Leatherface is, kind of like his lair, once they get to that house. And he goes down there, and like the way the score is, I'll get back to this, but this film is kind of quiet a little bit. And that's another thing that kind of makes this movie unique. I was going to put this in the negatives, but as far as the jump scares, I think it kind of worked because it made the jump scares really pop out. And like I said, there was a scene where this guy goes down in the basement, and that's kind of sort of where Leatherface is. That's where his lair is. You have this door where he slides in and out, kind of like that iconic scene in the original where after he kills that one guy with the hammer, he slams that door shut. And that's kind of what you get in this, and that's kind of like the door that Leatherface had for his lair. Well, he goes down, this random dude just goes down to the basement, and there's actually 2 scenes where this happened. One where this thief was stealing stuff, and he goes down, he's trying to get into that door, and he can't. So he just finds like anything to wedge himself through. When he turns around, bam, there's Leatherface. And he's dead. And there's another scene where this guy goes down, one of the friends of the main character, goes down and he's like, there's a baller's pit down here. And then, so he goes down and then the door is open to exactly to where Leatherface is. And he goes in and it's very quiet. It's very dark. And the movie goes very quiet. And then bam, Leatherface just rushes towards him. And the way that scene played out is pretty good. To this day, that actually makes me jump, depending on how loud I have my TV. So there's some great kills. There's some great carnage candy. And I salute it for that. Again, not as iconic and not as strong as the remakes, but still. I also have to mention this one scene where Alexandra Daddario is being chased by Leatherface through this carnival. And they had some sort of saw attraction where some guy was coming out with a chainsaw, which is ironic enough, with the pig mask, just like from the Saw films, and like they sort of clashed. Like Leatherface didn't do anything to him, just scared him off, and I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah, me being a Saw fan, I just felt like I had to bring that up, just real quick. And I like the whole beginning scene. As I stated, this is an actual sequel to the original 1974 film. I think this is where the requel thing in Hollywood really started. I'm not really sure. I know they've done certain things similar to this, like with Halloween H2O, where that one pretty much ignored all of the Halloween films after the original Halloween 2. But other than that, that's about all I know. And I think when Texas Chainsaw came out back in 2013, I think that's when that really started up. The whole requel idea that Hollywood has now. But the whole beginning scene was pretty interesting. It even showed shots of the original, of like some of the victims that the original had. And I like that. I like it whenever it connects to that close, connects that close to it. And somebody shows up that's a dead ringer for Jim Sedal, somebody that's not a stranger to horror or to this series, Bill Moseley. They got him in playing Drayton Sawyer for the beginning of this film. They actually got Bill Moseley to replace Jim Sedal for the role of Drayton Sawyer, and I thought that was pretty cool.
You did it now, boy! You let that bitch me get away.
And the way they made him look, I'm sorry, I gotta comment on this. I know this is probably not like most reviewers' interest, because I know this movie didn't really do that well critically. But I like the way they made Bill Moseley look. They made him look so much like Jim Sedal in a way. And I don't think there was like any digital effects except for like one shot. I did get confirmed that one shot was used as a digital effect shot. But other than that, it was mostly done on makeup, and I thought they did really well on him. Like I said, Bill Moseley is no stranger to the horror genre or to this series because he was Chop Top in part 2. So I thought that was pretty cool to see it. Ironically enough, and I guess it's because like the way they made him look, it took me a couple of watches after this came out on Blu-ray to realize that. And not to mention, in that same scene, you get the great Gunnar Hansen, who doesn't necessarily play Leatherface, sadly, but he shows up as one of the family members right before they get blown to hell. He shows up as one of the family members.
Give him the boy. He's simple anyway.
That was pretty iconic. I mean, that's the only part he's in, obviously, but that was pretty cool to see as well. The whole lighting, the way that this movie was shot, I liked it. Referring back to that scene where Leatherface just jumps out in the dark, I like the whole green atmosphere. It kind of made it look like a Saw movie in a way. Like, that could be a perfect scene for a future Saw movie, a perfect setting, wherever that was, for a Saw movie, because the way the lighting was, it looked all green. It's not just that scene. The whole movie was lit up pretty well, and it was just shot pretty well. And I like the whole all about family scenario. That message is knee-deep, just boiled into this film. Though there's a little downside that involves the main character of this, Alexandra Daddario's character, which I'll get to here in the negatives, but I like that whole subplot, which makes Leatherface, sort of like a protector in this. He's always been known to be all about family, though he goes about it in the most screwed up way possible. I honestly do believe, this has been on my mind throughout this whole series. I just trying to find the right one to actually bring it up. But the whole family thing, Leatherface is basically this disturbed grown man with an 8-year-old's mind. And I really do believe that if it weren't for the type of family he always had, I do believe that he would have been a little bit slightly more harmless. Everybody's opinion is different. You might have a different opinion than mine, but I really do believe that if Leatherface didn't have the type of family he did throughout the series, there wouldn't really be no movies. I really do believe that. I mean, I really do believe that he was sort of manipulated into being this monster. But that's just me. I mean, it's okay if you disagree with me. That's who Leatherface is. Like, without that, I really don't think we'd have movies. We'd have a series now. But that's just me. As I said, this movie goes back to the basics. It's a direct sequel to the original. It pretty much ignores every single one of these past the first one. And of course we had Candyman to follow and Halloween. So like I said, I really do believe that this is where the requel era started. 2013. And I was cool with that. However, and I only speak for myself when I say that this is a little bit of a letdown compared to the remakes, and that's, again, only because I have binge-watched these back-to-back for this film review series on this channel. I do see this one as being a little bit of a letdown, and that's on the fault of the remakes. That's because I've praised the remakes so high, and I always will. But Texas Chainsaw 3D does kind of take a little bit of a leap. So sliding on to the negatives, and this is no one's fault but my own, but because of the remakes having such a great impact, I really don't think this one holds up that well. Sure, time has a lot to do with it. You get tired of certain things, and I did watch the hell out of this. But I really do think that I see myself watching the remakes a little more nowadays than I do this one. I have watched Texas Chainsaw many times, and yes, I did like it at first. But as I stated at the beginning of this review, opinions have changed. And now, since I watched every single one of them back to back, I see myself watching the remakes more. Not that I'm saying that I won't never watch Texas Chainsaw ever again. I'm pretty sure I will. But I just don't really think it holds up as a whole, as a satisfying enough leap in the series at this point. It's not the strongest, but it's not the worst, Part 4. I can rewatch it, have a good time, but after viewing the others, especially with the remakes, it did kind of take a little bit away from this. And the story was so convoluted. I've already mentioned the beginning scene. This couple finds this baby who later grows up to be Alexandra Daddario's character, a 20-something-year-old woman, or so she looks 20, which means this movie was supposed to happen 20 years after the early 70s. Now, there's a bunch of inconsistencies that happens here. One being the cell phone crisis. It's like they have future technology in the 90s. That's what I think this movie really took place in. So why would you have touchscreen cell phones? They didn't have those kind of cell phones in the 90s. They had cell phones like this. So again, they get cell phones from the future. Like, did they pull a Terminator scenario with that on off screen and just, get touchscreens? Because there was a couple scenes where it was just all in your face, where the cop goes into the house and films it from his touchscreen phone, and where the other cop was looking in from his touchscreen phone. It's like they knew they were messing up and they were wanting to let you know, but they still rode with it. And the other characters weren't necessarily my favorite. You had the boyfriend, Alexandra Daddario's character, and her supposed best friend that pretty much cheated on each other. It never got acknowledged, but I didn't quite care for that. You're supposed to care for these characters, and that really didn't help. And no acknowledgement is a funny thing. When shit hit the fan, they were about to cheat on each other. You know, the boyfriend was about to cheat on Alexandra Daddario's character, but when Leatherface was chasing her around, and then before anything came out of that, stuff pretty much just happened and they never acknowledged it. It's kind of funny. And speaking of Alexandra Daddario's character, I liked her at first, but I don't know, after this rewatch, I just really couldn't get into her. I think she kind of developed a little bit of a memory lapse. Because if you think about it, her friends, as much as I didn't like them, as much as I didn't care for them, there's still a moral compass here. So she goes on this road trip and her friends offers to come along as moral support. And then, of course, Leatherface shows up and they get hacked up for barbecue. So there's a scene at the end where even though Leatherface was getting beat up by the cop and the mayor and all that, they were related. And that's pretty much established, clearly established around that time. And she says something that kind of gets under my skin.
Right. Do your thing, cuz.
Again, do you not remember your friends being hacked up to bits? You know, nothing, no mourning, no nothing. Okay. It was just a little unbelievable if you ask me. And I never really was that big of a fan of the whole family squabble between the Sawyers and Carsons. I never really bought into that. You know, it's just, apparently they had this big family squabble, which we hear nothing about. And the mayor kind of brings it up in passing. He's like, oh yeah, I mean, your family go way back. Okay, and how so? We never get it, and we never will. We just never will. So I didn't really see the point of that. I mean, it was probably nice to see on paper, but on the screen, it just didn't really make that much sense. I just never really bought into it. It was just too much in your face to ignore, and it's just not something that I really cared for. And I've never really been a huge fan of 3D, especially in horror. Like whenever a chainsaw is coming at you or blood, it just looks so fake. It's different if you watch something like Marvel or like an action movie, like a sci-fi science fiction action movie. Yes, that's fine. But in horror, I never really got into it. I never really grasped that side of horror. It's the same as if you use like digital blood or anything like that. It just looks so cheesy. I never really quite cared for that. So in the end, guys, Texas Chainsaw 3D wasn't the worst in the series that I've seen. Part 4. I'm so sorry, guys. But it wasn't the best. It definitely did take a giant leap backwards, especially from the remakes. But you can still have a good time. Go, you know, pop it in at a party with your friends and family or whatever and just go nuts. It's not a complete waste. So if you're a fan of the series and have made it this far, you might want to slow down with expectations. However, you'll still have a good time with this. So expect to see a happy accident. So Texas Chainsaw 3D, what was your thoughts on it? Did you like the direction that they went with? Did you like the fact that they ignored all the others and just made this a direct sequel to the original? Did you like this version of Leatherface? Or was this not for you? Would you have preferred more of the remakes universe like I have instead? Leave me your comments down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. As always, like I said, we got one more to go and then the new one. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.